is Archon Fung from the Transparency Policy Project, and I'm talking to Dara O'Rourke, who is the founder of GoodGuide.com and a professor in the program for environmental science and policy and management at the University of California at Berkeley. I should disclose before this interview, in the interest of transparency, that I serve on GoodGuide's advisory board, but I serve on GoodGuide's advisory board because I'm a fan. Maybe we just begin by asking Dara, maybe you could talk a little bit about what led you to start GoodGuide.
So I'm a professor at UC Berkeley studying global supply chains, and really my academic work tries to understand the environmental and labor impacts of the global production chains that produce the things we consume here in the U.S. And about 5 years ago, I was actually putting sunscreen on my daughter's face, and I stopped just to wonder what was in this chemical formulation I was smearing all over her face every morning. So I went back to campus at UC Berkeley and did some research and found the #1 selling kids sunscreen in America had a number of problematic chemicals in it, including suspected endocrine disruptors, skin irritants, and even a potential carcinogen. That set me off really on trying to figure out what was in my own house, what I was bringing into my house, putting in on around my family, which quite frankly shocked me. And that led really to motivate us to take all this research we'd been doing at UC Berkeley and academic research on global supply chains and try to get it out to consumers right at the moment when they're making decisions, and to really empower them with radically more information than they've ever had before. So we're really trying to catch up with the movement towards a more transparent marketplace and to give consumers and citizens more information and really level the playing field so they have as much information as the brands and retailers do about us.
And many consumer products and rating efforts now rely on consumers themselves to provide information about the products, to review Amazon books or restaurants and coffee shops and Yelp. But GoodGuide chooses to go with a very different strategy, which is to get the best information and expertise that you can about those products. Can you talk a little bit about the benefits and costs of crowdsourcing information versus an expert and science-based approach?
Right, so when we first started, there were probably a dozen other initiatives like GoodGuide, but that were crowdsourced, basically letting the community vote on issues. So is Nike an evil company or a good company? Are they socially responsible? How do they do on labor rights? It turns out that the broader community or crowd is not very good at understanding or knowing facts about supply chain details about labor rights or toxics in sunscreens or climate change impacts. And so we have really built GoodGuide on an expert-based model. So we have a team of scientists and engineers that use environmental life cycle assessment methodologies, health hazard assessment technologies, social impact assessment technologies to rate products and companies. We pull in data from over 1,000 different data sources around the world. Much of that data is quantitative data around the potential human health hazards of specific chemicals, carcinogenicity, mutagenicity, reproductive health hazards. That's something that the crowd is not going to be expert at. Now, the community and consumers are very good at knowing whether a product works. How does the shampoo make your hair look? How does the food taste? Whether they like the performance or the efficacy of the product. So we do enable the community to participate in recommending and avoiding products for their efficacy and their use. But for scientific information about toxicity or pollution or labor rights, we look to expert data.
That's interesting. Now, GoodGuide, when I think about GoodGuide, I think of the main users of your data as consumers who are trying to find a shampoo that's less harmful or a t-shirt that is made under better social conditions. But GoodGuide also has other users who aren't direct consumers, which is quite interesting and counterintuitive in this space. Can you talk about some of the people who are interested in GoodGuide and the data and your analysis who are not the consumers, the final consumers of products?
Right, so we did start off focusing entirely on consumers and delivering this tool to consumers. So we have a website, GoodGuide.com. We have an iPhone app, free download to your iPhone or your Android phone, so you can scan barcodes and get information in stores. We've had over 10 million people use GoodGuide.com, over 700,000 download our iPhone app. But as you mentioned, interestingly, the day after we release ratings, we get phone calls from some of the largest brands in the world, and some of the largest retailers in the world, and some of the largest institutional purchasers in the world. So it turns out this data is very interesting to brand managers, the people at the tops of these supply chains, which unfortunately often don't know that much about their own products. They are often in the US brand and marketing firms that design a product and know how to market it, but the production is done somewhere else. So we have had very interesting interactions with the largest retailers in the US and some of the biggest brands, particularly in the consumer product space, the personal care, household chemical, food companies that really are now concerned about how much consumers care about these issues, how much they're talking about them, sharing about them, and learning. So our tools are now being used by institutional purchasers, cities, states, hospitals to make purchasing decisions, by big retailers to look at what they put on their shelves, and by the brands themselves to benchmark how they're performing against their competition, what they can be doing to improve, and really to use our data to understand both what matters scientifically, the hot spots in their supply chains, but also what matters to consumers, the hot button issues.
That's great. So in a recent article that you wrote in the Boston Review, you were looking back, you looked back on the GoodGuide experience, and one of your conclusions is that consumers and consumer purchasing decisions are not as rationally driven and motivated as you thought they would be when you first started the project. So
Right.
What drives consumer purchasing decisions, and how is GoodGuide reorienting to this new knowledge or view of consumption that you have now?
Right, so I approached this problem as a scientist, thinking that presenting factual scientific information about climate change or toxicity or labor rights would be enough to convince consumers to change their purchasing. It turns out that was a quite naive view of how consumers actually make decisions, and that traditional economists are wrong. We are not rational, utility maximizing actors that make perfectly rational decisions in the marketplace. So we've over the last year really looked at the behavioral psychology, behavioral economics literature, and in Silicon Valley what we call the game dynamics world, to understand how do people really make decisions. And so consumer decisions are driven largely by peer influence. So people want to know what people like them are doing, what they're wearing, what they're eating, where they're shopping, what they're driving. Status is a key driver of consumer decision making. Habit. The fact that my mother used a certain bathroom cleaner that looks blue and smells a certain way is going to drive whether I use that bathroom cleaner. Lack of information. Many consumers don't have good information to make trade-offs. And then finally, manipulation. We see in the marketplace massive manipulation of consumer decision making online retailers, online brands tracking us behaviorally, targeting us, trying to influence us at every moment, including today on Cyber Monday, giving us last-minute deals that end immediately, that make you have to act quickly because of scarcity. So all sorts of things are playing out in the market that are not about looking at a product and then rationally deciding if it's the best product for you or not. So what we're trying to do now is take this layer of science and this foundation of scientific information about products and companies and then get that into the actual consumer decision making. So we've built a number of tools recently. The GoodGuide toolbar, which allows you to, in Chrome or Firefox, surf the web, go to Amazon.com or diapers.com and do your shopping in your normal way, but bring your values with you. Bring what you care about, a personal filter with you to find out if products pass or fail your filters. We're bringing social networking in, helping you gain status and rewards among your peers for shopping a certain way, for doing certain things. So we're really trying to bring the world of behavioral psychology into what we're doing and to get GoodGuide's data into normal decision making.
Well, thank you very much. That's GoodGuide and its efforts to combine rational and behavioral approaches to consumption to make it more ethical, more healthy, more socially responsible. Thank you very much to Dara O'Rourke for joining us at the Transparency Policy Project.